Welcome to the Courage for Life Study Bible Study of Esther. I'm Ann White, and today we're going to be discussing Lesson 7 in the book of Esther. Before we get started, I want to do as we always do, and I want us to read the prayer that is at the beginning of this lesson. This lesson is titled, Worth the Risk. Abba, Father, you are sovereign over life and death. Give me the courage to obey you no matter the cost. That's what I want us to think about as we go through this lesson today. I want to think, is there something that God is calling you specifically to do, that you're willing to do no matter what the outcome is, no matter what the cost may be? Is there something specific that you know the Lord has been urging you to attend to? Whether it be forgiveness of someone, or whether it be a reconciliation, whether it be taking a step forward in a calling that He has that's specifically just for you. I want you to think about that as we look and see how Esther has handled her situation. Now, prior to this lesson, we saw how Esther and Mordecai responded to the threat that the Jews would be exterminated. Esther asked Mordecai to go and have all of the Jews fast and pray. Now, I want us to take a look back at chapter 5, because this is where Esther's plan to go before the king begins to unfold. Remember, they were going to fast and pray. Well, this is at the very end of that, and it says in verse 1 on chapter 5, on the third day of the fast, Esther put on her royal robes and entered the inner court of the palace just across from the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing there in the inner court, he welcomed her, and he held out his gold scepter to her. So Esther approached and touched the gold scepter. Now, she's been welcomed into the court. Now it's time for her to begin to make her request. The first thing that King Xerxes does in these next verses is he says, please tell me what you want. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. But instead of telling him her final request, she's going to work her way up to that. She evidently has been in a lot of prayer, obviously, for the last 3 days, praying and fasting and having others pray and fast with her. Now she's going before the king, and she's exercising the plan that the Lord has put on her heart. That first part of that plan is that she invites the king to come to a banquet. She wants to do a dinner that she's prepared for he and Haman. The king agrees. He comes to the dinner, and in these next verses we see that he asks her again, now tell me, what is it you really want? And so Esther again says, I'd like for you to come back tomorrow. Again, you and Haman, come back and let me prepare another meal for you. Let me prepare another banquet. And then I will tell you, she says, what it is, what my request is. So now let's jump over to our lesson and chapter 7, lesson 7, and let's see what's going on here. In the very first verse, we see that the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. On this second occasion, while they were drinking and eating, the king again asked the queen, Esther, he says, what is it that you want? I'll give you anything that you want. And she replies at this point in time, she's going to tell him exactly what she needs. So let's look at her reply here. In verse 3, Queen Esther replied, if I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request, I ask that my life and the lives of my people will be spared. For my people and I have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I could remain quiet, for that would be too trivial a matter to warrant disturbing the king. And so the king says, who would do such a thing? And Esther replies, it is Haman. He is the one who has threatened the lives of the Jews. So the king now responds with great anger. Now he has seen the whole situation, but let's stop right there. And let's think about how Esther prepared for such a time as this. Because of Esther's prayer and preparation, Esther has been faithful to the Lord and to her people. She's been obedient to God and to follow through with this plan. She's been patient. She didn't run into the court. She took her time and she sought the Lord and she sought his guidance. And she gained King Xerxes' trust by preparing for him, being kind to him, and coming to him in a way that was honorable, she gained his trust and she prepared to be able to give the news to him. So now let's look at our interpret section for today's lesson. Queen Esther had no idea how the king was going to respond, yet she determined that doing what was right was worth the risk, no matter the cost. We have to ask ourselves that exact same question. Following Jesus and following the Lord's will at times can be risky. It can cause us to have to step out in faith and risk something. But is it worth the risk? Are we willing to do what God's calling us to do, no matter the cost? That's a very serious question for us to answer. So let's look at how we apply this lesson to our life in very practical ways. The first step is to uncover our true selves and to ask ourselves this question. Are you willing to risk losing your job, your friendships, or even your life to follow the Lord? Here in the United States, and we've talked about this before, we often don't have to put our lives on the line, our jobs, or even friendships sometimes to follow God. But many people in the world do. And so as we contemplate how our world is changing, how our culture is changing, it can become riskier and riskier to be a Christian. So as it becomes more difficult, how are we going to respond? We need to ask ourselves that. Then we need to grasp God's love for us. And let's look at what God did for us. And how does that inspire us to be more courageous in our faith? Our passage under grasp God's love for us is Isaiah 53:5. So I want to read that to you. But he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. Let's just stop there for a moment and let's think about the sacrifice that Jesus gave for you and I. Unconditionally loving us no matter what we've done, no matter how many mistakes we make. Are we willing to take a risk for him? Ask yourself that today and let God give you the wisdom and the courage that you need to take the next step forward in his calling on your life. I hope that you'll continue to stay with us because in our next lesson, we're going to look at 2 courageous faith articles. In our women's Bible, we have the courageous woman of faith in Queen Elizabeth. We're going to talk about her. And then in our men's Bible, we have a courageous man of faith, John Wesley. We're going to be talking about him as well in our next lesson. Thank you for being with me today. I look forward to seeing you again. God bless you and have a great day.